pleasant good evening and welcome to Late Night Useless Thoughts. I am your host, Sho. Settle in, find a comfortable position, and simply permit your body to grow heavy. You might consider joining a quiet fellowship of explorers so we may continue these gentle inquiries together. But there is no need to decide at present. Simply let the thought drift by like a cloud in a tranquil sky. Tonight, we shall explore the unspoken rules of judging bread, a pointless yet somehow exhaustive analysis of the perfect loaf. This is not a subject that demands your full attention. It is a topic of minutiae of quiet, academic absurdity. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to remember. Merely listen and allow yourself to drift. We shall begin with the first and perhaps most arbitrary of all the rules, the crust's inaudible signature. The first thing any serious connoisseur of the baker's art must consider is naturally its sound. In the esoteric circles of bread evaluation, this is known as the audible signature. It is a measure of the crust's integrity, its confidence, its willingness to announce itself before yielding to the pressure of a knife or hand. And this is no mere metaphor, it is quantified, meticulously recorded event. The accepted protocol involves a delicate condenser microphone of laboratory-grade precision. Its diagram calibrated to capture the most subtle of acoustic transients. This microphone is placed upon a sound dampening stand positioned with breathtaking exactitude. The manual specifies the microphone must be held precisely 15 centimeters from the loaf's midpoint, angled at a 30-degree incline to capture both the initial fracture and the shatter that follows. The room itself must be anechoic, as near as one can fashion, with ambient noise levels not exceeding 15 decibels. This is the quality of silence required to truly hear a loaf of bread speak. For each of the main bread archetypes, the expected audible signature varies to a considerable degree, reflecting the loaf's inherent character and purpose. Let us first consider the commercial white sandwich loaf. This bread, a marvel of 20th century food science, possesses an audible signature of near silence. When you apply pressure, its crust does not snap or crackle. It yields. It gives away with a soft, almost apologetic sigh, a faint exhalation of displaced air. The decibel meter seldom registers more than a whisper, a sound that is lost beneath the baseline noise of the room. This is by design. The sandwich loaf is a creature of comfort. Its purpose is to be a soft, unobtrusive vessel for its fillings. A sharp, aggressive crust would be a violation of its every identity. So it is judged not on the presence of sound, but on its absence. A perfect score is a quiet, compliant failure of structure, a soundless surrender. The loaf's history is rooted in the uniformity. After Mr. Otto Frederick Rohrwater introduced his bread slicing machine in 1928, the clamor soared for factory-made bread that was incredibly soft and easy to slice. A loud crust would have been an obstacle, a flaw in the system. The loaf was designed for mechanization, and its silence is a testament to that heritage. Now we turn our attention to the baguette. Here, the audible signature is not just present, it is paramount. The baguette is the percussion instrument of the bread word. A proper baguette tradition, as defined by the French Bread Decree of 1993, must announce itself with a sharp, clear, resonant crackle. The initial break should register between 40 and 50 decibels, a sound often described in judging notes as a shattering of glass or walking on dry autumn leaves. This is not a single sound, but a complex symphony of fractures. The primary snap is followed by a secondary and tertiary cascade of micro crackles as the crust continues to splinter. The duration of this acoustic event is also measured. A superior baguette will produce a crackling decay that lasts for 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, a shimmering, rustling afterglow that speaks to a perfect bake and ideal hydration. This sound is a direct result of the baking process itself, where high steam in the oven creates a gelatinized layer of the dough surface, which then hardens into a thin, brittle crust. A dull thud or soft tear is an immediate disqualification. It signifies too much moisture, an underbaked crust, or worst of all, the use of forbidden additives that create a soft, yielding texture. The law of 1920 that prevented French bakers from working before 4 a.m. made a faster baking loaf necessary, and the thin, crackling baguette was the solution. Its sound is the sound of time-honored efficiency. Finally, let us consider the sourdough. Its audible signature is a more complex and subtle affair. It lacks the high-frequency, glassy shatter of the baguette, but it must have a distinct and satisfying crunch. The ideal sourdough loaf, when broken, produces a deeper, more resonant report, a low-frequency thump or crack that speaks of heartier, more substantial crust. The target decibel range is lower, typically between 30 and 38 decibels. This sound is often described as honest or rustic. A sourdough's crust is thicker and often chewier than a baguette's, a real result of its long, slow fermentation and the wild yeast in its starter. These ancient methods, which trace back to Egypt around 1500 BCE, create a different kind of structure. The sound is not one of delicate fracture, but of a firm, resilient structure giving away. After the initial break, there is less of a crackling decay and more of a dull rubbing sound as the dense crumb separates. The dusting of flour on the crust also acts as a natural acoustic dampener, absorbing some of the higher frequencies. A judge listening to sourdough is listening for integrity, a sound that promises a substantial, satisfying chew. The absence of this sound suggests a weak crust, a sign of insufficient fermentation or improper baking, a failure to honor the thousands of years of tradition that led to this loaf. And so the first test concludes. In the sterile silence of the judging chamber, a story has been told, a story of compliance, of flamboyant defiance, and of rustic integrity, all of it captured in a few fleeting decibels. After documenting the loaf's audible expression, the judge must now turn his attention inward to the silent, secret world of the crumb. The second unstoppable rule, After documenting the loaf's audible expression, the judge must now turn his attention inward to the silent, secret world of the crumb. The second unspoken rule governs the analysis of the bread's internal structure, a metric known as the Crumb Uniformity Index, or CUI. This is a purely visual assessment aided by sophisticated instruments designed to quantify the chaotic beauty or engineered perfection of the bread's interior. The procedure is exacting. A single perfect slice is taken from the absolute center of the loaf, using a serrated blade of remarkable thinness, guided by a beam of light and cooled by water to prevent any tearing or compression. This slice is then placed on a high-contrast matte black surface under diffuse, non-reflective lighting. A high-resolution imaging apparatus captures a picture of the slice at 2,400 dots per inch. This image is then fed into a proprietary analytical engine that assesses the size, shape, and the distribution of every single air pocket, or alveolus, within the slice's matrix. The engine generates a score on a scale from 0.0 to a perfect 1.0. A score of 1.0 would represent a perfectly homogeneous structure where every air cell is identical in size and shape and distributed in a perfectly even pattern, a theoretical ideal that exists only in pure mathematics. The Crumb Uniformity Index is simply a measure of order versus chaos. Let us return to our familiar subject, the white sandwich loaf. This bread is the undisputed champion of the CUI. For a loaf to be considered of premium quality, it must achieve a CUI of 0.95 or higher. The interior of a perfect slice is a testament to the marvels of industrial manufacture. It presents a sea of tiny, uniform spherical bubbles, each one a near-perfect copy of its neighbor. There are no large unsightly voids, no areas of dense compressed dough. This structure is critical to its function. It must hold butter or jam without letting them seep through. It must provide a soft, consistent cushion for fillings. The near-perfect CUI score reflects its history as a product of standardization, especially during the Second World War, when bread was fortified with vitamins and minerals to ensure public health. This push for nutritional consistency was mirrored by a push for physical consistency. Its even, close-grained texture is a triumph of controlled yeast activity. A low CUI score in a sandwich loaf is a sign of chaos, a fundamental failure of its very reason for being. The baguette, in stark contrast, is judged on its proud and deliberate rejection of uniformity. An artisanal baguette that scores high on the CUI has failed spectacularly. The ideal CUI for a baguette lies somewhere between 0.3 and 0.45. Its beauty is found in its irregularity. The crumb should be a wild, chaotic panorama of interconnected air pockets of all different sizes and shapes. One should find tiny pinprick bubbles alongside its vast, cavernous voids. The French call this an alvéolage sauvage, or wild honeycombing. This structure is the result of a high hydration dough and a long, gentle fermentation, which allows gas bubbles to coalesce and expand unevenly. The analysis would show a dramatic and uneven distribution of light and shadow. A judge looks for this chaos. He looks for structure that's open, airy, and anything but uniform. It should look as if it were spun from lace, not molded from foam. This raw crumb is a signature of his artisanal nature, a quality protected by the 1993 Decret PAN, which mandates traditional methods and guards against the industrial homogenization that a high CUI would represent. And then there is the sourdough. It occupies a middle ground, a space of structural, intentional irregularity. Its CUI score typically falls between 0.5 and 0.65. The long fermentation process, driven by a symbiotic culture of wild yeast and lactobacilli, produces a crumb that is more varied than a sandwich loaf but less widely open than a baguette. The bubbles in a sourdough are often described as lustrous or gelatinized with thicker walls than those of a baguette. They are typically more spherical or oval in shape, but they vary greatly in size. You might find a dense section right next to a large singular pocket of air. This is the signature of its leavening process. The bacteria in the starter produce acids that strengthen the gluten network, allowing it to trap larger pockets of gas without collapse. A judge analyzing the CUI of a sourdough is not looking for the uniformity of a machine or the wild abandon of a high hydration dough. He is looking for the story of fermentation written in the crumb, a visible record of the slow, patient work of microorganisms. The history of sourdough, from its accidental discovery in ancient Egypt to its journey with gold rush prospectors, is a history of harnessing a natural process. The crumb uniformity index, in its own absurd way, attempts to quantify this beautiful organic imperfection. The imaging apparatus hums quietly. The analytical engine renders its judgment, and the second rule is satisfied. The inner life of each loaf has been laid bare, measured, and assigned a number, reducing the poetry of the crumb to the cold, hard logic of figures. From the audible and visual, we now proceed to the tactile. The third unspoken rule of judging bread requires a physical interaction with the crumb, a test of its resilience, its memory, its very spirit. This is quantified by a measure known as Crumb Rebound Index, or CRI. It is a test designed to answer a simple yet profound question. When pressed, does the bread have the will to rise again? The apparatus for this test is deceptively simple. It consists of a polished cylinder of stainless steel, weighing precisely 50 grams, with a perfectly flat circular base measuring 2 centimeters in diameter. This weight is attached to an arm driven by a fine micrometer, allowing for a gentle placement and removal. The same central slice used for the CUI analysis is placed on a firm level surface. The weight is lowered until it rests entirely on the crumb, right in the geometric center of the slice. It is left then there exactly 10 seconds, a duration measured by a precision chronometer. After 10 seconds, the weight is lifted, and a laser displacement sensor measures two things: the initial depth of the depression and the degree to which the crumb returns to its original height over the next 30 seconds. The CRI is expressed as a percentage. A score of 100% would mean the crumb returned instantaneously and completely, leaving no trace of the pressure it endured. A score of 0% would mean it remained permanently compressed, a scar left on its structure. First, the commercial white sandwich loaf. Here the CRI is a measure of its engineered elasticity. Industrial bread, with its carefully selected dough, conditioners, and enzymes, is designed for softness and resilience. Its performance in the CRI test is expected to be exemplary, with scores often exceeding 90%. When the 50-gram weight is applied, the fine uniform crumb compresses easily, offering little resistance. It is a soft, pillowy depression. But when the weight is lifted, the magic of modern food science is revealed. The crumb springs back with an almost eager vitality. The tiny uniform cells, through momentary crush, reinflate, pushing the surface back towards its original plane. This high elasticity is a key quality marker. It ensures the bread will not become a dense, gummy paste under the slightest pressure from a knife spread in cold butter. It speaks to the fortification efforts that began in the 1940s, creating a loaf that was not only nutritionally reliable, but structurally robust in its softness. A low CRI in a sandwich loaf indicates a flaw in the formulation, perhaps too much moisture or a failure of the gluten network, resulting in a sad, flaccid bread that cannot recover. Next, we subject the baguette to its indignity. The baguette's response to the CRI test is one of proud, brittle resistance. Its primary purpose is not to be soft or resilient, but to be crisp and chewy. The large, irregular air pockets of its open crumb do not compress uniformly. When the weight is placed on it, some parts of the crumb collapse entirely, while the thicker glutinous strands around the larger holes offer more resistance. The initial repression is therefore uneven, and when the weight is lifted, the rebound is minimal. The baguette CRI score is typically very low, often between 15% and 30%. It does not spring back. The delicate thin walls of its alveoli have shattered, not compressed. They hold no memory of the pressure they endured. A high CRI score for a baguette would be a cause for alarm. It would suggest a dough that is too dense, too bread-like, lacking the light, airy structure that is its hallmark. It would imply a texture that is gummy and chewy rather than light and crisp. A baguette is not meant to be poked. It is meant to be torn and eaten. Its low CRI score is a badge of honor, a testament to its delicate ephemeral structure. Finally, the sourdough. As with the other tests, the sourdough represents a more nuanced character. Its CRI score falls between the two extremes, typically in the range of 40% to 60%. Its dense, chewy crumb fortified by the acids from its long fermentation offers significant resistance to the 50-gram weight. It does not yield as easily as a sandwich loaf. The depression it forms is shallower. When the weight is removed, the rebound is slow, deliberate, and incomplete. It does not spring back with the manufactured urgency of the sandwich loaf, nor does it remain shattered like the baguette. It rises slowly, thoughtfully, as if contemplating the pressure it just endured. This partial leisurely rebound is a sign of its unique texture, a combination of density and elasticity. The strong gluten network gives it an inherent chewiness and strength. It has memory, but it is not a perfect memory. A judge looks for its specific character, a firm resistance, followed by a slow partial recovery. It is a physical manifestation of its ancient heritage, a bread that is substantial, resilient, and unapologetically itself. The prospectors of California Gold Rush carried sourdough starters because they were hardy and reliable, and the resulting bread shared those qualities. The CRI test, in its way, measures the same enduring spirits. The micrometer is retracted. The laser sensor has fallen silent. The physical character of each loaf has been quantified, its resilience tested, its spirit given a score. The third rule is fulfilled. Now that we have thoroughly interrogated the bread's physical form, we must move to its function, and one of the primary functions of bread is to serve as a vehicle for fat. This leads us to the fourth and perhaps most delicious of the unspoken rules, the butter saturation coefficient. This is no casual spreading of butter on toast. It is a highly controlled experiment designed to measure the crumb's absorbency and its willingness to hold on to butter. The methodology is precise to the point of absurdity. The test was unsalted butter of the European style with an 82% butterfat content, tempered to exactly 18 degrees on the Celsius scale. At this temperature, the butter is firm but pliable. A specialized press extrudes the butter into the perfect 1 centimeter cubes. The bread slice, again from the loaf's exact center, is placed on a digital scale accurate to a thousandth of a gram. A single cube of tempered butter is placed in the center of the slice. A timer begins. The test measures how long it takes for the butter's oils to visibly saturate the crumb in a 1 centimeter radius around the cube, and the corresponding weight increase of the slice. This data is then used to calculate a butter saturation coefficient, a fictional number representing the speed and capacity of absorption. First, the humble white sandwich loaf. It is in its test that the sandwich loaf truly excels. Its fine, uniform crumb acts like a perfect sponge. The moment the butter cube is placed on its surface, absorption begins. The oils wick rapidly, and even through the network of tiny interconnected cells. The target saturation time for a premium sandwich loaf is a mere 7.2 seconds. The crumb darkens in a perfect uniform circle, and the digital scale registers a significant increase in weight. Its butter saturation coefficient is therefore extremely high. This is its purpose. It is designed to absorb butter or mayonnaise quickly and efficiently, creating a cohesive, flavorable experience. Its structure, so lauded by the crumb uniformity index, is what makes this possible. A loaf that resists the butter has failed in its principal vocation. Next, the baguette. Its performance here is as you might expect, erratic. The baguette's wild open crumb presents a chaotic landscape for the butter. The cube might land on a dense section and melt slowly on the surface, or it might be perched over a large air pocket into which it slowly collapses as it melts, pooling at the bottom. The saturation is anything but uniform. It creates strange, unpredictable patterns following the path of least resistance through the labyrinthine structure. There is no set time, but judges look for a range of 15 to 20 seconds for the butter to fully absorb. Its butter saturation coefficient is low and variable. It is not designed for efficient absorption. The joy of a butter baguette is in the contrast, the rich solid butter against a crisp chewy bread. The bread serves not as a sponge, but as a platter. A baguette that soaked up butter too quickly would become soggy, losing the very textural integrity celebrated in the audible signature test. Finally, the sourdough. The sourdough's dense, chewy crumb and gelatinized cell walls represents a formidable challenge to the butter cube. The absorption is slow and deliberate. The acids in the crumb seems to almost repel the fats initially. The butter melts on the surface, forming a glistening pool before it begins its reluctant journey into the crumb. The saturation time is the longest of the three, often exceeding 30 seconds. Even then, the absorption is not as deep or complete as in the sandwich loaf. The butter tends to stay closer to the surface. This creates a distinct layer of flavor and texture, the pure tangy flavor of the unbuttered crumb below and the rich savory flavor of the buttered layer above. Its butter saturation coefficient is the lowest of the three, a testament to its density. A judge sees the slow, shallow absorption as a positive trait. This speaks to a robust crumb that can stand up to wet toppings without becoming sodden. It is a bread that maintains its own character, refusing to be completely dominated by what is placed upon it. The timer stops. The final weight are recorded. The fourth rule has been observed, and the lowest relationship with fat has been exhaustively and pointlessly quantified. We have arrived at the final and most intimate of the unspoken rules. After the sounds, the sights, the feel, and the function, there is only the experience itself. The fifth rule is the Mastication Durability Index, or MDI. This is the measure of how bread behaves in the mouth, a sensory analysis of the chewing process. It is the point where all the previous findings, crust integrity, crumb structure, rebound, and absorption, converge into a single unified experience. This is the only test that is purely a matter of the senses, yet it is guided by a rigid framework. The judge takes a 1-inch square of each bread type into his mouth and is required to chew at a steady, meditative pace. He is instructed to count the number of chews required to break down the bread into a state ready for swallowing. This number is the MDI. The ideal number is not the same for all breads. Each has its own target range, reflecting its intended character. First, the white sandwich loaf. Its purpose is untroubled consumption. The MDI for a perfect sandwich loaf should be low, between 8 and 12 chews. The soft crust offers no resistance, and the fine absorbent crumb, already softened by saliva, dissolves with remarkable speed. It is a fleeting experience. The bread yields almost immediately, melting away upon the tongue. A high MDI will be a catastrophic failure. If a sandwich loaf requires 20 or 30 chews, it is no longer soft and pillowy. It is tough and gummy. It has failed in its mission to be an easy, unobtrusive food. Next, the baguette. Chewing a piece of baguette is an entirely different endeavor. Here, the MDI is expected to be significantly higher, in the range of 18 to 24 chews. The experience begins with the crust. The first few chews are dedicated to shattering the thin, brittle layer, an echo of the audible signature test. The first few chews are dedicated to shattering the thin, brittle layer, an echo of the audible signature test. Now experienced as a tactile sensation. After the crust fractures, the judge encounters the chewy, irregular crumb. This is not a crumb that dissolves. It must be worked. The glutinous strands demand a deliberate and patient mastication. The low crumb rebound index is felt here. The crumb does not spring back, but it does resist. A low MDI for baguette would indicate a lack of chewiness, a soft, uninteresting interior. The act of eating a baguette should be a small journey. Finally, the sourdough. The sourdough stands as the pinnacle of masticatory durability. The target MDI for a good sourdough is the highest of all, ranging from 25 to a formidable 35 chews. This is a bread that demands commitment. The experience begins with a thick, hearty crust that requires significant effort to break down. It is not brittle like the baguettes, but tough and resilient. Once through the crust, the judge encounters the dense, moist, and chewy crumb. This is where the work truly begins. The high resistance and slow partial rebound from the CRI test are now fully experienced. The crumb is elastic and substantial. Its tangy flavor unfolds slowly throughout the long chewing process. It is a bread that makes its presence known and refuses to be rushed. A low MDI would suggest a failure in the fermentation, resulting in a crumb that is too soft or cake-like. The sourdough's character is defined by its substantial, enduring chew. It is a bread with history, and the effort required to eat it is a sign of respect for the time it took to create. The final chew is counted. The number is noted. The journey is complete. From the first distant sound of crackling crust to the final intimate act of mastication, the loaf has been analyzed, quantified, and judged. The ledger is closed. The lecture is over. There's nothing left to do now but rest. The criterion of gravitational settling, the index of repose, the coefficient of staling. Perhaps those are topics for another night. For now, good night.